So part 3 of 3, here is a review of the shot that we're making. This is going to be the last and final part inside of Fusion on how to finish the comp. Now back in DaVinci Resolve, I'm going to show you how you're able to work with the EXR file from the render that we got downloaded from Blender. So you want to add a new bin, right click new bin, enter it in as renders. And then you're going to need to import the EXR file that you downloaded or rendered from Blender. I don't know again why my screen capture didn't capture it, but just right click import media, go on your desktop where you saved the EXR files from the Blender render, and then you want to import that into your media bin here. And then once it's imported to your masters bin, then you can just drag it and then drop it into your renders folder to keep your media bin a little bit organized. The next thing you want to do is get into your comps, right click new Fusion composition, and then name that as shot 1. Make sure again you set it to 12 seconds. Again, I don't know why my screen capture didn't capture it there, but you just right click new Fusion composition, name it as shot 1, set it to exactly 12 seconds. And then we have all of our bins. So we're going to drag in our footage. This is our original footage. We're going to connect that to our media out. And then that's going to be essentially our clean plate. And next we're going to grab the spaceship render. We're going to drag that in and then drop it into our node panel for our node tree here. And then you can rename these by hitting F2 on your keyboard. So I'm going to click on this media 1. I'm going to hit F2, and then I'm going to name this one as like a clean plate, because this is essentially our clean plate, our background. So I'm just going to name that as plate. And then the next one, I'm going to click on and name that one as our render. So that way we don't get confused and we can keep our node tree organized. So now we have our ship render and we have our clean plate. Next, what we're going to do is work on bringing this information in with a merge node. So you can shift space, search merge, or hit the little merge icon, which I just did. And then you're going to connect the ship render by clicking on the square box, and then you want to drag it on top of the merge node 1. And then it's okay if you don't see anything here. I'll show you how to work on that. You need to click on the ship render and then jump over to layer. So this is where our layers, that's why it was important for us to render the layers from Blender so we can work with them on the composition here inside of DaVinci Resolve. So you want to go to the combined ship, and then it's okay if the colors aren't exactly the same. I'll show you how to get the color space transform information from Blender, so that way it will look the correct color for the ship. So in order to get the render into the correct color space, what you'll need to do on an Apple computer, go to the Finder and locate where you've downloaded your Blender program. On Windows, you're going to come and just right click, open the file location, and you're going to go to the whatever version you have, 4.0, 4.1, 4.2. I have 4.2. Double click, and you need to get into the data files section. And then under data files, you need to copy this color management folder. It has the information needed in order for DaVinci Resolve to bring the render into the correct color space. So what you can do is just kind of copy this to your desktop. I already have a folder there, so I don't need to recopy it. So you want to copy this to your desktop, or just remember where you're going to save it, because then there's a separate node that we're able to bring into DaVinci Resolve in order to bring the render into the correct color space. And then here's a quick screenshot for anyone using Apple on how to get to the color management to get to the correct color space that I was able to grab for you. So you can use this to work on an Apple device. So we want to search for the node by hitting shift space, and then we're going to look for I believe it's the OCIO node color space. and then we're going to connect that node in between the ship render and the merge one. Then we want to select that node over into our inspector, browse, and we're going to go where we save that color management data on our desktop, and then we're going to click on that OC or the OCIOC file to bring it in from our desktop. Once that's brought in, then we're going to be able to click on the source space drop down, and then we want to bring that into the linear rec 709, and then the output space, we want to select that drop down box, and then we're going to go down there and search for the AGX base sRGB, and that'll bring it into the correct color space. So now we have our ship with the combined pass with the correct color space transform merging on top of our clean plate going into our media out. So now we can see that we have our ship animation. There is no shadow yet because we haven't brought that in yet, but this is basically our simplistic node tree with our clean plate going in to our ship merge. What we're going to do is now bring in the shadow catcher. So I'm just trying to rearrange my timeline a little bit better. So we want to bring in another merge node, and then we also want to rename that, we're going to copy the copy paste. So copy the ship render, and then we're going to paste the ship render and then connect it to this merge node 1. And then now we should be able to click on the layer from the combined ship. We're going to go down to the shadow where the shadow catcher is, and now we have the shadow on our merge on top of our clean plate. So next thing that we need to do is click on the merged node, and then on the apply mode we're going to switch that from normal to multiply. So that'll bring our background back in, and now we have the ship and the shadow on our composite here. So you can see that the shadow, don't worry about how dark it is, I'll show you how to kind of composite it in just a second here. But you can F2 on the merge node, and now we want to call this shadow underscore MRG. So we know this is the shadow merge node. And then we have our ship underscore MRG for our ship merge node as well. And you can toggle these on and off by, I believe, pressing P on the keyboard to kind of see what those look like with them on and off for each layer. And then for this one, we want to show this one as like our shadow, ship render shadow 1. So now we have our shadow, and then we have our ship on our clean plate, and then it's coming out to our media 1. So next we're going to copy the ship one more time and then paste that, and we're going to name that one OI for our ambient inclusion, and we're going to do another merge node and bring this merge node in between the color space and the ship merge node. So we want to make sure that this is connected in between and bring our ambient inclusion in on the green arrow in order to have our ambient lighting be comped in on the shot. So the next thing we have to do on our ambient inclusion merge node, you want to name that OI merge, and then we have our ambient inclusion. It's basically we just copy pasted from our render ship and named it ambient inclusion. And then now for the layer inside of that EXR file, we're going to go to ship AO. And then this is how we're going to work with our ambient inclusion on our comp. So when we add in that ambient inclusion, it's blocking out our background. So don't forget to click on the merge node and set that to multiply as well. We need to set that to multiply on each one. We're still missing our background here, but I'll show you how you're able to pull that alpha channel to bring that background back so you're able to view it. Some kind of housekeeping: anytime you click on a node, you can toggle on and off to see what that node is affecting. So you can see me here turning the ambient occlusion node on and off, and kind of see all that black is blocking out our background. Another piece of housekeeping is you can click on any node and then press 2 on your keyboard, and then you'll see a little white dot next to the node, and that's basically where your viewer is viewing. So click on it, press 2. We're going to go back to the ambient occlusion layer, and then what we're going to do is go to the EXR format section here, and then on our alpha channel we're going to basically bring back our background. So we click on the ambient occlusion node, click on the EXR format, and then for our alpha channel we want to have that for our ambient occlusion is going to be with the ship combined A going into our merge node. Now we're looking through the merge node by pressing 2 on our keyboard, and now we're looking through the media out by pressing 2 on our keyboard, and we can check that by looking at the little white light next to each node. So again, ambient occlusion, merge, and make sure that you have those settings so that way we can bring our background back in. Now on the merge for this ambient occlusion, you can go to the settings and then adjust the blend to taste. So this is where you can kind of adjust how much of the ambient occlusion is affecting to make it look like it fits in your scene here. So just messing around on this to try to make it look as realistic as possible. But going into settings on the merge node, you can kind of blend. If you want your ambient occlusion to be really strong, push it all the way to 1. If you want it to be really weak, bring it closer to 0. And then you can kind of toggle it on and off to kind of see the changes that it's making with the ambient occlusion for your comp. So the next we got to deal with is our shadow. So because the shadow looks way too dark right now, we want to click on the merge node for the shadow, go to settings, and do the same thing with the blend, where we can kind of blend that down to make it match our real world shadows a little bit better. So you can see underneath the trees they're looking really soft. So again, it's just kind of tooling around to match it as best as you can. So that's why I was stating before, in Blender you don't really need to worry about how dark your shadow is. You just need to make sure the lighting direction is more important, because inside of DaVinci Resolve on this blend tool we're able to kind of adjust it to make it look more real world, to kind of sell the effect a little bit better. Alright, so next we need to work on getting our motion blur in from our vector pass. So what you're able to do is again hit Shift Spacebar to bring up our search toolbar, and you want to look for the vector motion blur node. So we have this vector motion blur node 1 that we're going to want to put in between our ambient occlusion merge and our ship merge. So we just want to kind of select all these to give us a little bit more space to move these up, and then we want to connect the vector motion blur in between this line here, and then you can hold Shift. Right now it's not connected, so if it's not connected, select it and then hold Shift until you see the lights light up, or the lines light up, and then you want to make sure that it's from the OI merge or AO, sorry, merge as yellow, and then into the ship merge as green line. And then what we're going to need to do is copy our EX file again, and we're going to paste it, and we want to connect it to the green line on the vector motion blur. Because remember, when we did our EXR file, we also rendered out the vector motion blur. So you're going to select the ship render that you copied, come up to the layer section, and then you're going to select the vector pass essentially that we rendered out, and then this is going to give us the motion blur for our 3D character on here. So again, on the layer, go down and then select the vector for the motion blur. Actually, scratch that. You're going to need to do it underneath, sorry, the X velocity and the Y velocity for the ship vector X and ship vector Y. And that's how you're going to get the motion blur data in, and you can kind of toggle that on and off, and you'll be able to see it getting a little blurry or a little bit less blurry. So you're going to have channel vector X and channel vector Y, and then we also have the scale on there if you want to make it all the way super blurry or not so blurry. So again, ship render EXR, and then X velocity and Y velocity, you select the ship vector X and the ship vector Y, and then on the actual vector motion blur you can toggle on and off to see the motion blur, and then the scale is essentially kind of like the strength that we did the blend in the previous nodes there. So if you have something moving really fast, you can scale it up and then kind of toggle on and off to see. I don't know if you're able to see through the YouTube compression, but you can also scroll in with your mouse to get like a better look, and then you can see, oh, super crisp and motion blur, because a real object is going to have some type of motion blur in a camera. So having the vector motion blur data in is going to help sell the effect a little bit better. So again, you can toggle on and off to kind of see the motion blur effect that it has, and then use the scale to get it to where you like it, to make it look as realistic as possible. Alright, so next we have the color corrector node. If you again hit shift space bar, you'll bring up the search toolbar and then search for the color corrector node. We're going to want to put the color corrector node right after the vector motion blur and then right before the ship merge. So just make a little bit more room, and then we're going to drop this color corrector node in between these two nodes here. So you got to make sure it turns the right color, and again you'll have going into yellow and then coming out to green for the ship merge. And then what you're going to notice on this color corrector node is if you adjust, say, contrast, it's going to be affecting the entire image, and that's not something that we want. So the way to get around that is go to options and then just check this pre-divide post multiply option first, come back to our corrections, and now if you do the contrast, it's only affecting the ship. So here you're able to do any kind of color corrections. If you need to lift the highs or lower the highs, you have your gain, your brightness, your contrast, and then you can also adjust overall saturation hue, and then any kind of color tint that you're able to use on the color wheel is only going to affect the ship. So again, this is just to try to bring your image into the comp. So again, you can see how changing the color only affects the ship. So if you need it a little bit more warm or a little bit more cool, whatever you think is going to look best to sell the effect, you're able to adjust only the color of the ship. So next we can bring in another color corrector node if needed. Again, you'll hit shift and then space and then search color corrector, and we can bring this in on our shadow pass, and this will affect the kind of edge of our shadow if we need any kind of color correction for our spaceship shadow. And then the other one we need is a blur node, so you can search the blur node here, connect that as well, and then we have this blend or the blur size where you can soften the image a little bit more, which is what's needed for this render because it's way too harsh. So we gotta bring up the blur size a little bit to kind of sell the image. And then here I can demonstrate in the color corrector, this is now only going to be affecting the kind of like edges of our shadow here. So if you had a tint to the light, you're able to do a color correcting color corrector node here to help sell the effect a little bit better. And then on any of these nodes, you can kind of toggle on and off to see the changes that are being affected from each color node. That you can click on the node, and then in the inspector, click on this little toggle to switch in between to kind of figure out what is going to look best. So I just want to kind of mess around and see a little bit cooler, or not really doing that much to sell the effect, but it's a good tool, important tool for you to know. So next is just going to be some kind of finishing touches, and after all of our comps, we're going to do another color corrector node, and then this is going to be like an overall kind of color correction for the entire image. So you can kind of adjust your contrast. This would kind of be like maybe like your final color grade that you would use to help overall sell the effect. And then there's going to be a couple other comps that I'll show you here that are more to your taste, but just kind of show you the tool that you have to bring everything. You can see that it kind of darkened the image a little bit there with this color corrector number 3. And then next we want to bring in just a slight vignette. So you can again hit the shift spacebar and then bring up the search and then search for vignette. And then we're going to drop that after the color corrector. And then it's going to give us our vignette. And then in the inspector we have the size of the vignette, the color, the softness. You can adjust this. Again, this is all to taste, to show you some other comp tools that you have inside of the Fusion inspector panel here. So you can kind of get this to your personal preference. Again, this isn't 100% needed, but if you click on settings and then blend, you can kind of see what it does to darken the corners of the image to give it a little bit more of a camera vignette look. All this is just kind of personal preference to taste. So one other tool that you're able to use to kind of bring it in is a film grain node. So again, shift space to bring up your search, type in film grain, and then you can put this last before our media out 1. And then again, this is just to kind of tie the 3D image into like our clean plate. So if you zoom in, you can kind of see the film damage, and then you're able to change the size of the actual film grain itself, the complexity, or like the noise or the film look. You can have a, I don't know, Super 8, Super 16, and then also underneath the size you have strength, roughness, and offset. So you can kind of play around with these tools to bring the spaceship in to the comp to kind of sell the effect a little bit more. So that's pretty much all the tools there to comp. So if we look at our kind of node tree, we have our clean plate going into our shadow merge, going into our ship merge, going into color corrector 3, into a vignette, into a film grain, into the media out 1. And you can toggle on and off the film grain to kind of see the effect and see if you like it. And then also use the settings blend tool to kind of change the strength or the blend of the film grain as well. And then on the node side of thing, that's pretty much the composition there for you. So that's pretty much everything other than just rendering it out. You'll click on edit, and then you'll go over to the compositions master bin that we have saved. Comps, and then we have shot 1. So that's basically our fusion, all the nodes that we've done. If you hit play, it's going to play it back very slowly. So we need to hit deliver, and then we can render this, and then this will play back much smoother once you render it. So you'll render it as a MP4 or whatever type of video file you want to use. Save that on your desktop, and that's pretty much it. That's the shot. That's using DaVinci and Fusion and all the comps that we have. So Hopefully you enjoyed the tutorial. Definitely tag me if you guys use this and anything that you create. I would love to see what you guys do create with this tutorial. I know it's kind of a little bit longer, but it's basically from zero to finish beginner. Somebody who's never picked up, hopefully is able to kind of follow along and comp in their first, visual effects shot here. So once you get this rendered out, then it's obviously saved as an MP4. It's going to play back a lot faster, and you can add in, sound effects. You can add in music. You can add in letterboxing to make it look and feel more like a real shot that's part of a larger movie. So now that that's rendered, I have the final MP4 render. You can see if I bring that in on the timeline, that's going to play back in real time. So it's no longer using the Fusion nodes because we got that rendered out. And we have our spaceship that is coming home to land in the middle of the Swiss Alps. So again, this was a longer tutorial. That's why I broke it up into 3 different kind of parts. Part 1 with DaVinci, part 2 with Blender, and then part 3 with Fusion. Also DaVinci, but doing the comp there for you. And then, like I said, you can add in a letterbox and add in music and sound effects to make it kind of fit like in whatever, short film or story that you're using. So, all right, this was fun, and hit me up if you guys have any questions.